Welcome to Your Schools on Community 7 Television. I'm Shoots Veis and I'm your host. Each month we look at a different aspect of what's going on in Billings Public Schools. This month we're very excited to have Wanda Morales with us. Wanda is an English teacher out at the Career Center. We're going to talk about what English teachers do and maybe a little bit about the Career Center. So Wanda, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
All right. Well, before we dig into good big bad English teaching and all of that fun stuff, tell us a little bit about you. Give us a little background. Did you grow up in the area? Did you come to the area? Give us some history.
Okay. Well, anymore, I feel like I'm from Billings, Montana. I've lived here since '95. I moved here as a senior. My dad was in the military, and so I moved here my senior year to senior. Yeah. And actually went to senior and part-time to the Career Center then. And then it's been home ever since.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then did you go to school here? Where'd you go to school to become a teacher? And how did you know you wanted to get into teaching?
That's a great question. Yeah, people ask me that all the time. Why? No, so I actually went back to school. So I'm a non-traditional student. I went back at 37 and wrapped up my degree in English and started working at the Career Center right after I graduated from MSU Billings.
Oh, okay.
And at the Career Center, so that was 2017. So this is my 4th year of teaching.
Okay, all right. And so the only place you've been a teacher is out at the Career Center?
Yep.
And was there anything in particular about the Career Center that drew you out there, or that's where they needed an English teacher?
You know, it was actually pretty interesting. So at the time, there were a lot of applicants, and I was interviewed by West High and the Career Center, and I hadn't even thought of Career Center as an option. I just thought of high schools, high school English teacher. I thought of the 3 main high schools and didn't consider the Career Center. And then once, I got hired by the Career Center, I was so thankful because it just made sense for me too.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about that difference. Yeah, I think for the most part, when people think of the high schools, sometimes the Career Center can get lost in that, although everyone seems to be relatively aware of it, but they don't think of it right off the top of the bat. Oh, it's Skyview, it's West, it's Senior. So maybe compare and contrast. What are some of the things that are exactly the same about the Career Center as your traditional high schools, and what are some of the things that are maybe a little bit different about the Career Center than your traditional high schools?
Sure. And so the way I see it, and the way that we talk about the Career Center is that Career Center is Billings Public Schools. And so we represent West, Senior, and Skyview. And we have students from all across those 3 high schools that come to our school for programs that are CTE. So
Career and Technical Education.
That's right. So career and technical education, they come for those programs. But for a long time, the Career Center has been considered in our community as an alternative school. And so part of, the culture and community understanding of what the Career Center is about continues to evolve. And I love the opportunity to talk about that because we have students that come for engineering, we have students that come for medical classes, we have students that come in for automotive classes, and so computer classes. So it's an array of computer CTE courses. And because we have those CTE courses that in order for students to be prepared, they need the rigor. And the rigor exists in the core classes that we provide at the Career Center. And so we have AP courses now because we have students that are going into EMT, and so it's just so the courses match that as well.
So you can, I think out of the Career Center, you can get a lot more focused on maybe some of those career and technical education tracks, but there's also the core classes like your English, like your history, stuff like that. So do students come out there all day, some half? So how does that work? What does your student body make up that way?
Yeah, originally, and I think the way it's set up is that students come half-time to the Career Center to get those classes that they want, and then they're still part of their own high school culture, whatever high school they're at. But by the time, and then once they're out there, not gonna lie, students love it. And so they stick around, juniors and seniors, and then they sometimes they opt in to either stay at the Career Center or they miss the culture that they have at their home school. So it depends, but the point is it's options. And so the Career Center gives options to students in the technical field that truly where high employment rate availability is available.
Yeah. So as a teacher of one of those core classes, what are some of the classes you teach out there? Is it all the same grade, different grades? Tell us a little bit about some of the classes you've taught out there.
Sure. So I've stuck to pretty much 9th grade and 11th grade. This year I have 4 sections of juniors that I teach, and then I have 1 section of honors classes. And that's honors freshmen. And so freshmen also come out there to take biomedical classes or engineering classes, and once they meet those prerequisites, we have to lay out also the core subjects that they need as well.
And how many are in the English department out at the Career Center?
Sorry. Is there 5 of us? Marianne, Claire, Denny. So sorry. Dan, Holly, and me. Oh, so there's 6 of us.
Oh, 6 of you.
6
wow.
of us, yeah. And when and since I've been there, and when I joined in 2017, we've actually added 2 FTEs out to the Career Center, so it continues to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I know we talked about you have 9th and 11th graders. What other, I'm sure there's 10th grade English and 12th grade English, but is there some other elective type classes too with that many different teachers that are available to those students in English at the Career Center?
Absolutely. And again, it's because if we're going to have students that are coming out for those CTE courses, we have to have the rigor and the courses that match those. So we also, next year, we're going to have 2 sections of college public speaking. We have college writing course out there for juniors. AP courses are also offered. It started with 1 small section of AP, and I think now Mr. Charlton has 2-3 sections of AP, so it just continues to evolve.
Sure. All right. So let's talk a little bit about you and what your expectations were of becoming a teacher. You said you came to a little bit late, so you probably did have some expectations. Tell us what your expectations were, and then what was it really like when then you actually got in front of that classroom?
You know, I saw that question, and I was like, how can I authentically answer that? Because, of course, I was idealistic. I came into the profession because I love working with students. Education has been a powerful force in my own personal life and has sustained a healthy life for me and my children and my family. And so I came in idealistic, wanting to have relationships and connections with students, teach them, and have all that rigor. The reality is that a lot of times I'm burnt out. I'll be honest, I'm hitting that burnout mark that's real, that I didn't think it existed. I was like, I'm not going to be that person, right? And so, but I am that person, and I think it's very real. And so I said, expectations, I didn't expect to have to support the level of support that my students need socially, mentally, and emotionally is what I did not expect.
Sure.
And I also didn't expect the public to have so much say on what I do in my classroom. You know, coming from, I worked in healthcare before this and administrative support systems and stuff, and I was like, that was different to me, that public opinion plays a huge part in my role as a teacher. And so if that makes sense.
Sure.
Do I love what I do? Yes. Do I love my students? Yes. And will I continue it? But there's some realities that I just did not expect. I thought I was above it.
You know, it's interesting. For those of you that don't know, my wife is a teacher. She teaches out at the Career Center with Wanda as well. But one of the interesting things that I found from her is there are cycles to it. And it's about that point when she's just about at the end, just about to burn out, is when you guys have a break. And then there's a nice break in there, and she can go, and they're just spaced almost just right. So
right.
I don't know if you find the same thing as well.
I do. There is a pattern to it, you know, and I thought teachers had it cush. Like, you know, you have summers off, what do you complain about? Or you have vacations, or, you know, your schedule. But the reality is that teachers leave the buildings tired, especially during the last year that we've had. Every other week, high school teachers do not have prep periods, and so we are teaching for 6 hours on every day, which is fine because we're up to the challenge, but there are realities to that challenge. And so it's the balance. And right now it's been really difficult to find balance in my teaching life, professional life, and my personal life. And so that's been tricky. And so yes, I welcomed summer 2021 with all of its glory.
Absolutely. I think you're not the only one.
Nope.
Given some of the expectations you had going in and where you are now, how do you think you've grown most as a teacher?
I think I've grown most as a person. I think just in learning about myself, how I learn, how I teach others to learn, how I help and guide students and how they learn for themselves, and the differential aspect of it has been extremely rewarding. The connections and the relationships that I have with my students and with my colleagues has been great. But truly, I think just myself and my person has gotten stronger. There's a grounding to it. It's humbling to see the strength of today's youth.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's no such thing, but give us a typical day in your classroom. What are students expected to do? What is a typical day, or what does a typical period look like in your classroom?
Yeah, one of the things that I really, and I've done it in my parenting, and I tried at, in my classroom, is consistency. So I have a pretty well managed structure that I provide. I give off really warm mom vibes and welcoming vibes, and so sometimes students are confused. But for the most part, they have a consistent structure.
Sure.
And in that structure, we do work. And that's our purpose there. And so sometimes we have to be reminded of our purpose. And our purpose is long-term goals, so then that way you're prepared, whether you're going to college or you're going into the workforce, wherever you're going. There isn't this emphasis on college per se. That's shifting. There's an emphasis on students being ready for whatever challenge that they want to do. So for teens, you have to remind them and support them to understand that, because I don't think that's a natural understanding for a 16-year-old, right?
Sure.
And so my day-to-day routine is meeting the needs of my students. Sometimes things happen at nighttime, and I have to meet their needs at the same time of supporting someone and understanding the piece of literature that we're studying in class.
Sure.
And so it's just a combination of multitasking.
Yeah.
This week, I have prep week. So I start my day with prep week, which is wonderful, but I use my prep week to plan for all of it. So but then also meeting the student needs and supporting my colleagues if they're out, or whatever's going on. So
yeah.
I don't know if that answers a question. It's chaos, Shoots. It's chaos.
Absolutely. Take us back a year ago.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're going to be teaching from home. What was that experience like for you? What was it like in your classroom that way? What did you learn from that experience moving forward? But walk us through what that experience was like for you.
At first I felt like I was going to have a day off. I'll be honest. It was Sunday night, and I was like, oh my gosh, I get to sleep in, and have a moment. And then that moment became reality. And I started thinking about my students that come to school for food. I thought of my students that are homeless. I think of my students who have difficult circumstances at home. And quite frankly, I did have, it was very difficult emotionally. And how am I going to connect with these students when we really didn't utilize the platform as we needed to. And
Sure.
so I was trying to figure out, how can I develop an online culture with my students so we can finish the rest of the semester.
Yeah.
And that was really tough because we were on islands.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody was on an island and just in survival mode, but I think the weight of what I experienced and many teachers that I'm friends with experienced was the worry.
Yeah.
The worry of our kids, the worry of our students, the worry that they weren't learning. It was hard.
Yeah. So then over the course of the summer, you're coming back. They do have school online, but you're teaching in the classroom. Was there anything that you took from that experience of being online with those kids that you could bring back to school in the fall? You're still going back to school in some pretty weird circumstances. So how did that transition go? Okay, now we're online. Now we're back in school. We've been out of school for a while, and now we're back in school. How did that transition go?
Well, I think it was agonizing for teachers and parents, period. We went back to school on a Monday, and that's when we found out what kind of schedule we were going to have on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And so the reality of that was difficult and challenging, but we persevered, and it was hard. The only thing I did take back was that I was like, okay, I need to establish a forum that works for all of my students, and we need to do this collectively. And so I learned how to match my assignments, in Google Classroom, for example, on PowerSchool. Like, there were things that I had learned how to do, how to get discussion going on, the platforms that were available. But the challenge was, what was different was that I had also kids that were in the classroom, and then because of contact list or COVID rates, people actually still sick, we had half the class would be gone and half the class would be there, and sometimes I would only have six people. And so not only was I running the platform for my classroom, like many teachers, we're running the platform online as well, because we got to keep track. I would actually have lists of students from each of my classes to figure out when they were going to be there and gone, keeping track of my online students and my in-class students.
Yeah.
But we made it,
Yeah.
and those numbers have come down. I don't know. I think it was one day at a time.
Sure.
During that time frame.
Yeah.
And also providing this providing the sense of adult stability for these students, because they needed to know that we had it together. I mean, that's what children need, right?
Yeah.
And so they don't need us frantic. They don't need us complaining. They don't need that. They need to come to school so they can feel safe, and more importantly, so we can get back to our purpose, which is to learn, to build those skills, so then that way you can move forward in life.
Sure. Through all of that, what have you found to be the most challenging aspect of teaching during a pandemic?
I think it's fair to say that as a whole, we are all still struggling with the restrictions, the economics. There's a lot. And I think we do have pockets of greatness in Billings, Montana, that the rest of the nation still is like,
right.
I mean, under, I don't know what a word would be, but strict restrictions where we are not. And so I would say the emotional support that students are needing right now, because they are tired.
Yeah.
We're tired. And as proud as we can be about being in school in Billings, Montana, I think it's important to recognize what teachers have done, and more importantly, to recognize the strength and the commitment of the students who are really trying to make it through this year.
What is maybe something that was been surprising to you that you thought, this isn't going to go very well, then it actually did go pretty well, and I might use that going forward, even though we're not in a pandemic?
That's a great question. There's a lot I don't want to relive. I would say one of the things is knowing how to get the job done when we're struggling. I think it's resilience. And I think modeling, practicing resilience to the level that we've had to this last year, I think I will always carry that forward. And I think this group of kids will as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, has technology, I don't know, it's all there. I used it before.
Yeah.
I think it will just be a welcomed, what am I saying? We're trying to think here. A welcoming environment that doesn't feel with all the restrictions and the stress of in the realities of the pandemic,
Sure.
if that makes sense.
Let's talk about this on two different levels, I guess. One because of the pandemic, and one not because of the pandemic. So let's start with not because of the pandemic.
Right.
Normally in your classroom, how do you assess the kids that walk in, the freshmen that walk in the door, where they're at, where we need to go? How do you assess them when they come in your classroom? And then part B of that question, and I can ask it a little bit later as we get through that, is, okay, now given the pandemic and certainly some students who struggled through that piece of it, how are you doing that assessment to make sure, man, I hope they're really haven't lost a whole year?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to relationships. If I can't connect from my students, they're not going to learn from me. There has to be joy in learning. And as cheesy as that sounds, it sounds cliche, there has to be. I have to make sure that my classroom feels safe and welcoming so I can get to know where they're at. Because sometimes it could just be a confidence issue or a relationship issue. And so I can't assess a student until I know them. So I get speedy, like I'm speedy. I find out their names. I get to know who they are. I open up myself. We get to know each other. And as far as assessment goes, well, that goes with my standards and my curriculum. And then my assignments align, and I can formally assess where they're at. And writing is so vulnerable for so many people. Most people hate English. Like nobody shows up to my class excited.
Well, there's got to be one or two out there, at least one or two.
But for the most part, a lot of people have had poor experiences with either math or English, and so I have to change minds. I have to basically, rev it up and pick up some lost time so that way they can put words to paper, put words to screen, because of the blocks of confidence that a lot of my juniors have in particular. Yeah.
And so then once you kind of find out where they're at, do you have a wide spectrum, or, are you going to have to teach, the kid that's way behind, I'm going to have to give a lot more versus that kid that it doesn't matter what you put in front of them, they're going to knock it out of the park. And so, how do you deal with that wide spectrum of, okay, now I've done my assessment, this kid's probably going to be fine even if I was the worst teacher in the world, versus I really need to get to this kid, because if I don't, they're going to be another 2 years behind.
Right. And, and I think that's part of the, we talked about the expectations of what teaching looks like. The fact of the matter is that if I have 28 students in the classroom, I have 28 different learners and 28 different students. Yeah. And so even with that kid that's high level, 97% in my class, they're going somewhere. And so I need to provide them the same level of support as my student who's really struggling with just turning in assignments, so I can assess them. And so really it's trying to be available to both those students. The reality of that is tough, and you got to be fast, but when you got those relationships down, and I truly believe it, kids will work hard, and then when they're willing to work is when you can get, momentum going in their learning and get the assessment and pick up those pieces. My assignments don't change, right? The standards don't change. What we're trying to do is lift those students to proficiency. And so once those students are at proficiency, we're still doing more. But yeah, I would say for the most part, Billings Public Schools is a great district. And rarely do I have students that have fallen through the cracks and show up in my junior classroom who aren't ready to be in junior English.
Sure, yeah.
So it's a collective.
Yeah. Are you able to have conversations with your colleagues? Hey, I had this kid in 11th grade and they're coming into 12th grade. You really need to work on this or that. I mean, do you have those conversations, or the conversation from a colleague, they had them in 10th grade and say, Wanda, you're really going to need to focus on X, Y, and Z with this student?
We don't do that. I guess if I have a question about a student, but my colleagues and I, maybe this is just the way our norm in our department is we don't actually talk about specific students unless it's necessary.
Sure.
A lot of what we do is just is as a group, we look at common assessments. And so I listen to, what Denny is missing out on, Miss Otrogi, missing out on, when she's teaching her research paper in the fall, and I'm listening to her and listening to the struggle she's doing. So when I'm teaching my research paper come May, I'm preparing for what I'm hearing, what she's saying.
Sure.
Or, with Katie Meyer, who teaches EMT, is seeing, wow, kids don't know how to get up in front and do a presentation. I'm like, okay, I need to get into gear.
Yeah.
And so that's just accountability for the job I do, and I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough to work in an department where we operate from
Sure.
those means.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, does that?
Yeah, that answers the question. What types of technology are you using in your classroom? What are you interacting with the kids with, and what do you see working with them, and what have you maybe been surprised that, boy, this is going to be a slam dunk to use with my kids, and it was a dud?
That's a great question. Here's another one. So you think because teens are on their phones, that they're technically savvy. Not necessarily. They're still learners. They're still students. And so digital literacy is huge, and most of our communication is digital literacy.
Yeah.
And technology, I'm super excited because of COVID. COVID money, I got my own computer cart this year.
Very
and
good.
so every English class got a computer cart. And so the accessibility to a computer is key to get students on the computer. Am I old school and still appreciate the pencil to paper? Absolutely, but kids need to know how to navigate in the world today. And so I have computers. That's all I have, but that's really all you need for the most part.
Well, and it is, and at a professional level, I guarantee you they're not going to be writing memos with a piece of paper and a pencil. You're going to be sending that email. So are those some of the skills that you guys work on? This is what an email should look like. This is what a professional email would have in it.
Yeah. In fact, we have email etiquette. And so that's something that we go over with our students. Many of us go over with our students at the beginning of the semester, because it's not like, hey, I finished this assignment.
Right.
That's it, right? We are like, okay, like kudos.
Yeah.
So we practice those email etiquette because we need to have those soft skills translate over to job and employability.
Yeah, absolutely. What is one thing you wish teenagers knew about learning English?
There's no wrong way to do it. There really isn't. English to me is your voice. How can I use my voice to communicate my story, my purpose, my goals? And English is also active listening to other people, and literature is about gaining empathy. And so it's really, for me, English, it might sound like some old Greek scholar, but it really is just a humanities for me.
Sure.
And so I take it back to the humanity, what it really is, the purpose that it is. Do we like commas where they belong? Well, who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to think that, but really, so many times people are judged by the way that they write.
Yeah.
And so much judgment, because writing is an indication of thought. And so when your writing is critiqued, then your thoughts are also being critiqued. And so it's kind of breaking down that pattern of behavior in those walls, those defense mechanisms, so we can build the confidence in order to rise the level of writing that anybody can truly produce.
Sure. What is one thing you wish parents knew about teenage learning?
I thought about this. I think teenagers need sleep. I would say our teens are doing great, and they're hard workers. I would say what they lack is sleep structure. You know, as a parent of a teen, I'm guilty of it too. You know, I buzz up to 9 p.m., time to go to bedtime, and my teen, you know, I assume is going to bed. He doesn't need me to,
Sure.
He's fine,
Yeah.
right? But then the reality of a teacher, and I see the tiredness on these kids, and when I ask them, when they, you know, and they're probably a little bit more honest with me than mom or dad,
Yeah.
or a guardian at home, but I would say overall, most of my students are, you know, work close to full-time hours, and I think that's something that's different, that has continued to evolve over the last few decades, and teens are tired.
Yeah. What is the most rewarding aspect of teaching English?
I think a lot of how we communicate and a lot of how we write and the way we read and the way we understand the world around us comes through literature and writing, in my opinion. I know there's other aspects. Obviously, it's not all about English. One of the rewarding things for me is when a student starts developing a sense of identity for themselves. And that can come through just relationships. I don't even know that the subject is even as important as it is the experience of learning and watching a teenager, you know, a young adolescent just really thrive and figuring out what they want for themselves, I think has been extremely rewarding.
All right. Gaze into your crystal ball a little bit. Where do you see you teaching English in 3 to 5 years? What's going to be the same and what's going to be different?
Wow. I think what's going to be the same is my connections with students. That's my safety net. In such a difficult year that we've all experienced and the level of burnout, I would say that when I'm in my element with my students and we're working, it's magic. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. I see that remaining. Where I see myself, I would like to see myself in a position, I think more in the educational community where I can maybe, I don't know what that looks like. That I really don't. I would like to see certainly, I don't know. That's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough because I don't have all the answers. But I would like to see a community where we support our teachers a little bit more. I would like to see that and support more of our educational community. I'm not saying it's non-existent. What I'm saying is that I would like to see more, I guess, just a stronger community when it comes to our education.
All right. Well, Wanda, thanks so much for coming in and talking with us today. It was fantastic. And to you and all the teachers who've worked through this difficult year, thank you. Thank you for all you do. It's obvious you have a passion for your students, so thanks for doing it, and thanks for putting up with those teenagers every day.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.